Hey nerds, so today's video is going to be in response to a comment that was left in one of my previous videos. I'm going to be talking about ABA 509 reports. Before I get started, make sure you throw me some likes and subscribes and some comments down below if you have questions, concerns, or suggestions on what you'd like to see for next time. So let's start at the beginning. If you're applying to law school, you've probably heard of an organization called the American Bar Association, ABA for short. What is the ABA? They are many things, but for the purpose of this video, they are the organization that accredits law schools. Every year, the ABA publishes information about all of the schools it accredits on its website. Of those reports, it includes 509 disclosures, employment outcomes, and bar passage rates. Today, I'm going to specifically talk about 509 reports, and I'm going to go through a couple of them with you. If you're first coming across this information, it's very possible that you're going to wonder why this information is actually important. But believe me, it's extremely important. And the reason for that is because law schools are businesses. I mean, no, not literally businesses, but at the end of the day, despite them, or a lot of them not being for-profit organizations, they still make a profit. So they have something to gain, and you should know what they are working with. This is just going to be a tool in the wide range of things out there that can help you make an informed decision. So let's get started. The simplest way I can describe a 509 disclosure is a 3-pager of admissions information and information about current law students. Because, I'm going to Georgetown, we're going to pull up that school. If you have a Mac, it's going to pull it up as a download. All right, so let's zoom in on the basics for Georgetown University. We see that it's a private school. We see our application deadline, application fee, and financial aid fee. If I pan down, I can also see information on Georgetown's academic calendar. Here, the only thing that I really focus on is, for example, when the school year begins, which is August, and the number of credit hours required to earn the JD. The reason that number is important is because it tells you how many credit hours you need to take per semester in order to get your degree. The way that you can calculate the number of credit hours that you would have to take per semester to graduate on time is if you take 85, divide it by 3, which is the number of years that it would typically take to complete a JD full-time, and then you divide that number by 2, which breaks down the number of credit hours you'd have to take per semester. Now let's pan down to curricular offerings. Now I'm not going to focus too much on this section, but in short, what it can do is give you a gauge of the typical class size and the number of course offerings. So let's get to the juicy parts. The admission stats. Right here, that's going to be in the same place in every ABA disclosure, and it's going to be marked 2019 first year class. So that's going to have the statistics information for all of the incoming L1 students. So if we want to get a breakdown for what admissions looked like for Georgetown in 2019, it looks like they received a total of 10,366 applications. Next, we have their total offers of admission. It looks like of those 10,366 students, 2,026 students were actually offered admission. Another number that's going to be super important here is the number of enrollees from the applicant pool, which we see as 551. So of the 2,026 students who were offered admission, actually only 551 showed up at Georgetown's doors that fall to attend school. Another number that we have here is other first-year enrollees. That number is about 22. Now, what that number typically indicates is the number of students who deferred their admission. I spoke about this briefly in a previous video, but students who defer their admission are students who were offered admission in a previous year and decided to postpone their admission to the following year. In this next section, we have the Lsat and undergraduate GPA stats for the incoming L1 class. We can see the total number of students in the incoming L1 class are 573. Now, at Georgetown, because they have a full-time program and a part-time program, they would combine these two numbers, 518 and 55, to total to 573. Because Georgetown has both a full-time program and a part-time program, they have broken down stats for both of them. But keep in mind, at schools that only have a full-time program, they're not going to list these two sections. They're just going to have a full-time section. I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of detail on the Lsat and undergraduate GPA sections, mostly because I consider these sections to be pretty self-explanatory. But I will highlight one section, which is the number of students not included in Lsat calculations. This is a section that was relevant to me because, as I've mentioned in a previous video, I applied to law school without any Lsat scores. I was a pure GRE score admit. So if I wanted to see a breakdown for how many students were accepted to a school without Lsat scores, I could take a look at this section. It looks like in total, Georgetown's incoming class had about 48 students who were not included in Lsat calculations. That's a number that a student like myself would be considered into for the 2020 ABA 509 disclosure for Georgetown. Next, we have a section entitled Faculty Resources. That basically lists the demographic information for faculty, librarians, and administrators at the university. The only part of this section that I really paid attention to was the number of female faculty and the number of minority faculty. Now let's scroll down a little bit to a section that has JD enrollment as of October 5th, 2019. The reason this section can be extremely helpful and very telling is because you basically get a demographic ethnic breakdown of all of the students that will be attending that law school with you. Now, for the purposes of this video, I'm actually going to refer to all of the sections highlighted here as ethnicities, because my race is human, my ethnicity is Black American. In this top section here, we have JD1, JD2, JD3, and JD4. What that implicates is the year in school that a student is enrolled in. JD1 means L1, first year. JD2 is L2, second year. JD3 is L3, third year. Because Georgetown has a part-time program, and because part-time students typically graduate in 4 years, they have a JD4 section. But many schools, if they don't have a part-time program, will not have that. The next line we have here is T, M, W, and L. We can also see that that repeats for each year in law school. T stands for total. M is for students who identify as men, W is for students who identify as women, and O is for students who identify as other. Specifically, I'm going to focus on the Black or African American section because that's a demographic I belong to. We have the total number of first year JD Black students as 51. 21 identify as men, 30 identified as women, and 0 identified as other. If we take this line all the way to the end, we can see the total number of Black students for each year of law students. And we can see that there's a total of 187 out of 2,000 students enrolled at Georgetown that are Black. We can also see more specifically in the L1 year that of the 572 students, 269 identified as men, 299 identified as women, but only 5 identified as other. After the JD enrollment section, we have a section called L1 Tuition and Fees. We see a breakdown for full-time students and for part-time students who pay by credit hour rather than paying a full flat fee. This section can be especially important if you're looking at a state-based school. For example, you can see what your tuition cost would be if you were a resident versus if you were a non-resident. But with private schools, because everyone is charged the same amount of tuition no matter where they live, this section isn't going to be as important with a school like Georgetown. Next, we have living expenses. I'm not going to go into much depth on this one either, mostly because it's my opinion that living expenses very much can change based on how you live and where you live. The next section I'll highlight here is conditional scholarships. Here it says, this school does not award scholarships that may be reduced or eliminated based on law school academic performance, other than failure to maintain good academic standing. Therefore, the school does not complete conditional scholarship retention chart. If you get a scholarship from a school that has this type of listing in their 509 disclosure, the only way that your scholarship could possibly be taken away is if you're not in good academic standing. It takes a lot of the pressure out of keeping your scholarship. Next, we have a section of JD degrees awarded between 2018 and 2019. Another section that I'm not going to go into too much depth on, but it breaks down the degree recipients by ethnicity. A little further down, I have a very important section, one that I've gone into more depth on when I was talking about law school scholarships. But in short, we have a section that is grants and scholarships between 2018 and 2019. Here we can see the total number of students, which is about 2,013. Of those 2,000 students, about 1,171 received scholarships. That breaks down to about 58%. Of that 1,171 students who received some type of scholarship, the overwhelming majority, meaning 763 of them, receive less than half tuition. Only 389 of those students receive half to full tuition, and only 19 of those students received full tuition. 0 received more than full tuition. In the sections over here, they break down those numbers by part-time and full-time students. There is quite a bit of variation. Part-time students look like they're less likely to receive scholarship money. Now, towards the bottom of the scholarship and grants section, we can see a breakdown of scholarship money by amounts. So for example, if you receive a scholarship and you're in the full-time program of $37,000 or more, you're in the 75th percentile. The same goes for $15,000 or more in the part-time program. If you want to learn more on how to look at the grants and scholarships section of a 509 disclosure, take a look at my video talking about how to find scholarships for law school. I'll leave a link in the description box. Towards the bottom of our 509 disclosure, you have an actually very important section that people oftentimes don't look at as closely as they should. It's a section for academic attrition. And what that means is the number of students who had to leave a school based on them not being in good academic standing. The reason the academic attrition section can be extremely important is because it can show you any trends in academic attrition based on ethnicity, gender, and school year. Under the academic attrition section, you have other attrition, which accounts for any students that left a given law school for any reason that might not necessarily be related to their academics or not being in good academic standing. Because this one can be so broad, it's actually really difficult to tell much information from this section. The final section of any ABA disclosure is for transfers. Now, this can be extremely helpful for transfer students, and the reason for that is because it lists every school that a law school accepted transfer students from, and the number of students that it accepted. So for example, it looks like American University had 21 students transfer from their school to Georgetown, and the average GPA that transfer students had if they transferred to this school. And that's it. We have it, the end of the 509 disclosure. Now I'm going to go into Howard University and look at their law school's 509 disclosure to show some of the differences and similarities between a school like Georgetown. Let's go back into our ABA website and let's look up Howard, my alma mater. I'm a proud graduate of Howard University, and honestly, if I hadn't gone there, I wouldn't be the person I am today. Also, shout out to our potential next VP, Kamala, who is also a Howard alum. When schools don't have a part-time program, their JD enrollment section is actually going to only list JD1, JD2, and JD3. Another key difference between Georgetown's disclosure and Howard's disclosure is between conditional scholarships. As I mentioned earlier, Georgetown doesn't award conditional scholarships, but because Howard does, you actually have some stats to look at in this section. So for example, between the 2018 and 2019 academic year, 56 students entered with a scholarship, and 17 of those 56 had their scholarship reduced or eliminated because they didn't meet the conditions of that scholarship the following year. Another key difference between Georgetown and Howard's ABA disclosure is the transfer section. Now, Georgetown, because they had more than 12 students transfer in, they actually had to list every school and how many students from each school they accepted transfers from. At Howard, it looks like only 4 JD students transferred in. So they didn't have to list the school each student came from, the GPA information, or how many students from each school they accepted transfers from. We've gone through all of this information. I do want to emphasize that looking just at the numbers for a law school gives you a very limited perspective of the entire picture. Just how these law schools are going to be out here judging you based on your stats, you should judge them based on theirs too. That's all I got for today. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave me some comments down below. I'll see y'all soon. Kitty cats. rule the world. Kitty cats, rule the world. Oh no, no, my hair.